you look at employee turnover, and it was not uncommon to have 50% annualized turnover, as in half of your staff would leave an agency every single year. You've undone all your efficiencies. Recruitment agents are paying to just shuffle people across. And it really does concern me. It just totally devalues the whole discipline of marketing, that the idea that there's a trick that you need to do. What would happen if you exposed the payroll? What would your staff say to you? Trying to dump one person with the expectations that you just outlined, it's not just unrealistic, it's just damn unethical.
And some of their reviews were, don't do it, you'll regret it. The only good thing is the day ends. The challenge is very poorly skilled management from the top to the bottom. Gerard, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks, Jack.
Good to be chatting to you. I'm excited to talk to you again. Been on a few episodes of the podcast now, so thank you for taking the time as always. I do appreciate it. We are going to have a chat about a very specific topic today, which I'm sure we've both got stories to share. I know you've got a lot of views on like recruitment agencies coming in and hiring marketers effectively for companies, and also there being a high general turnover of marketers at the moment. Why don't you kick us off with a story around this topic and why you're so, I guess, why you've got to be in your bonnet about this.
So again, I've worked for 3 agency holding groups, and one of the things that really shocked me was the level of turnover. As you started to get into the management and running these agencies, you would look at things and you'd look at employee turnover, and it was not uncommon to have 50% annualized turnover, as in half of your staff would leave an agency every single year. That is massive. That is such a huge amount of turnover, of change of culture, of personnel, that it has to have an impact on the continuity of business, of service, and I guess skill set in delivery. You're just going to have this turnover. And it's not uncommon. And it's not uncommon for a few reasons, some of which I know to be real and some are more Gerard theory. For those that have worked with larger marketing agencies, look, it happens less in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne particularly. If you go into these media groups, look at their agencies, you're going to see a lot of Brits. There are a lot of Brits working in Sydney and Melbourne, working for agencies. I guess part of it's the transferable skills. I guess the ease of getting a visa. I think there's also a little bit about sponsorship, and it's one way you can kind of hold on to staff members. But I would not be surprised to find half of a digital agency based in Sydney who are British citizens. I have worked for them, have been at that level, and I remember looking at that number and it went over 50%, and I was in the room and there was 6-7 executives, of which 2 of us were pegged as being not British, and I had to kind of let them into the secret. Actually, I'm a dual citizen because I took British citizenship because I had lived in the UK for 10 years. And so I was like, 1. And then he just went, well, I'm Irish. It's not that different. The makeup of these agencies is very different. I think the bigger question is around staff turnover, like why the turnover? Why the burnout? Is it burnout, or is it chasing slightly higher rates and fees? There's also the reality, and we can cover any of these tangents, client turnover, right? The brutal reality is when a client sacks an agency, they have to either make redundancies or replace that client. So if you're in a market like Australia, so look, this is far enough back that we can talk about it now. Flight Centre was a major agency win in Brisbane. Brisbane doesn't have too many anchor clients. So Flight Centre was a massive client. There was an agency that had them and lost them. There was such a lack of staff in Brisbane who could do digital and search at an appropriate level for such demanding and high client. The staff had to leave the agency that lost Flight Centre and they got recruited at the new agency. So Flight Centre turned back, and now I didn't work for either agency, so this is anecdotal, but I know it to be reasonably true. These staff then had to move to the other agency. And so, if you're Flight Centre and you've just sacked agency A and you turn back up ready to start at agency B and you see the same mug sitting across the table, you go, what's the point? Like, why did I do this? And it's like there's a lack of depth of talent to be able to provide this. You can be too big to be able to make these things work. I think sometimes clients don't appreciate that when they leave, yes, you want to use an agency because to a certain degree you can just let them go. It doesn't cost you staff, but it does cost them, and they are going to lose staff. And so you're perpetually under pressure to have to look at making redundancies because you lose clients, you lose revenue, you have to let some staff go or you lose all your staff. And I think that does lead to redundancies. And then the inertia between moving then gets picked up by agencies. So let's say Flight Centre's worth 10, 15 digital staff. Even if 5 of them find their way across at a 15 to 20% of first year's wages through a recruitment agency, you've undone all your efficiencies, right? Recruitment agents are paying to just shuffle people across. And it really does concern me. It really concerns me at the pace and speed that these things have to happen. But I guess the other thing too is for the staff members, it's the cost of or the opportunity of moving. I am often concerned when I see people moving for a few $1,000s. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're going to make that jump, make it for a good chunk of change, right? I think, and I can go through all sorts of tangents on these stories, but I do fear for the junior agency marketer. They get a recruiter in their ear and they're talking about that movement and they're talking about increasing their income by, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year, maybe $8,000, maybe 10, right? That's great. But when you're going through the recruitment, I fear that most new marketers don't appreciate that they're coming with a price tag above their head of another 15, 18, maybe 20% of their first year salary is going back to the recruiter. So if you're moving into a job and getting $100,000, that recruiter is going to get $15,000 to $18,000. Now, I'm not saying the recruiter hasn't done valuable work and that they don't deserve it. They've got their overheads, but you have to understand that your cost to the business has gone from the $100,000 salary to $118,000. Like there's an extra $18,000 that you're not getting. I think one of the key takeaways in this discussion, which we've only just started having, is if you are at a reasonably low level, going through a recruiter is not going to be the path for you making the most amount of money. Recruiters, I believe, in agencies should be limited to those higher level jobs where you actively have to, not quite headhunting, but not far off. You've really got to convince someone to come out. So you're on $120,000, $130,000. Okay, we have to really go in and convince that person to make the move. And yes, your fee is going to be $30,000, $40,000 as a recruiter, but I think you're really adding value there. You're finding really specific skill sets and experience to make that move. Look, definitely anything under $100,000, you need to be doing this yourself, applying through Seek and going through that process. I think the burden of the recruitment fee is just too high and, you might get into that position, but if it's you versus, Johnny, and Johnny's come in direct, Johnny's going to get the nod most of the time. You're going to have to lower your expectations by the equivalent of that recruitment fee. And that's significant. I think there's a lot of inefficiencies in the way that agencies run recruitment. I think the turnover, I'm not going to have solutions here, but recognizing the high level of turnover in a staff in an agency is scary. I try really hard at Fractal to keep the staff for as long as I can, but there is turnover. And you just have to be real and you have to deal with it. But there's a real cost to business, to continuity. And there's also a real cost when clients move their business. If you're a significant part of someone's business, if you're an anchor client, it's material. Like you don't just lift up your business and it's not without, there will be follow-on redundancies. I've been shocked. I've worked for big groups where massive brands have gone who are responsible for 50, 60 people in a building and they move their business and they seem to be almost oblivious to the fact that, you might be able to reposition 5 or 10 people, but you're talking 50 redundancies. It's not without cost. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't move because of that, but if you were going to make a move internally that had 40 people sacked, you'd probably spend a bit more time thinking about it. I have been shocked at how easily, we're talking big clients here, but big clients just willingly move their business away and just leave absolute chaos behind at the agency. And then, we have to think as well, like who leaves? Like there's a real, it's interesting, like the most talented, the highest, the most sought after people, when those redundancies are on the line and we know it's going to happen, the first people to find other positions are often the best. And you kind of wonder who gets left behind. I have seen that where the really talented people kind of see, not a sinking ship, but they know there's going to be problems. They've had opportunities. They can click their fingers and deliver on it. Like they've been speaking to someone, they know someone. And so you can end up just holding, you don't often lose the staff that maybe you wanted to lose. They kind of lock themselves in and the best people move on. And it's where we end up with these cyclical, moments where agencies are on the rise or they're struggling. When you're doing well and you're winning business and you're growing, you're hiring better people, you're retaining good people, and you're on your way up. When you're going down and losing clients, it is really, really hard to stop that momentum going against you. You start to lose good staff, other clients start to wonder, why did they leave? And you kind of feel like you're catching a falling knife, trying to stop that. And it's all based around people. In an agency, you're in the people selling business. You are selling people, their talent and their experience. And if you're losing the talent, you're losing that momentum, it's not great. And that inefficient inertia in the agency of transferring people across to sometimes even, like I said, end up working for the same client, it's an horrendously inefficient market. It kind of reminds me of the housing market, where you've got to pay a real estate agent to put things, you've got to pay your advertising costs, you've got to pay removalists, you've got to pay taxes and stamp duty, and all these things have got to happen. You just think, I don't have answers. But in a fluid, perfectly efficient world, people could just transfer houses. There wouldn't be costs and things. And we'd all move houses more. We'd move closer to where we want to live. Everything would work fine. And it's the same with recruitment. If the costs weren't so high, if it was far more efficient, it'd be great. But whenever these moves happen, there is so much inefficiency and cost loaded in terms of staffing up, recruiting people, because the new agency will sign the client. Absolutely. Yeah, $1 million a year worth of billing, absolutely sign that. And then they hire behind. So you got to question, I think sometimes you can be too big to really efficiently move between agencies. And so you sit there and you just go, so who did you move for? If they've only got 20% of the staff to service your business, the other 80% are unknown. Yeah. Look, maybe there's relationships and they can get involved with the hiring and everything else. But, oh man, I struggle. I really struggle when I see those kind of inefficiencies, and I worry about where the costs are born. And we've said this before in our chatting. The client ends up paying. The client ultimately, when that inefficiency there, has to be tacked on, has to be thrown into your rate and your retainer, and the client ends up paying for it. And I just think, if me coming onto your podcast and talking about these things and being real about it, if we can achieve a level of understanding between client and agency of where there's inefficiencies and where there's costs, what we need to do, ultimately we're going to end up with a better model. Marketers are going to service clients better and more efficiently because some of these things are known. And if you know where there's costs of pitching, there's costs of recruitment, there's costs of hierarchy, all these things, if you can appreciate that, they don't have to be gone, but if you appreciate that they're there and why they're there, you can make decisions that are maybe better informed. The world's not going to change because Jack and Gerard had a conversation.
We never know.
Maybe this is the moment. Maybe I'm changing the world.
Yeah, maybe this is the catalyst to it all. But really interesting story about Flight Centre there, where you go to another agency and then you end up with the same people you're working with. And as we were speaking about before, agencies often, a lot of that's selling people. So then you're just buying the same people with a different logo. I think that what I've seen as well is, like you were talking about, the client expectation of agencies can be out of control at times, but I've also seen that, or like an employer expectation of marketers can be absolutely out of control too. And that's, I think, where I come from on this topic. And I'm not sure if you've seen some crazy JDs out there, but there's quite a few kicking around, and I did prepare one for this podcast just to see. I looked at this on LinkedIn or Seek recently. I'm just reading through this paper in front of me at the moment, and the number of responsibilities, this role, and this isn't that uncommon, I see this quite a bit, was just out of control. Like for a marketer, product manufacturing, industrial services, industrial distribution, Holdco brand, founder brand. This is all these platforms they've got to be across. They're going to own product marketing, brand and creative, content engine, sales enablement, website SEO and organic social, employer brand, founder brand, acquisition marketing. So this is on the one JD, and this is just part of the JD that I'm reading, that one person is going to be responsible for all of these things.
I think you could find an agency that could deliver all of that experience.
I know, but this is expectation in one person. And not only that, I was looking at part of it, and it's like, this is going to be director of marketing or something, right? That's what you'd think. But no, they report to the director of marketing. That's who they report to. They're not even the director of marketing. It's like, what's the director of growth and marketing doing then? If this is, the product marketing person. But anyway, I was reading this, and I saw... sometimes I go on Glassdoor afterwards and have a look at what people have said about the company advertising this. And some of their reviews were, don't do it, you'll regret it. The good things, the only good thing is the day ends. The challenges, very poorly skilled management from the top to the bottom. You could see that though. You read this wild JD and you go, okay, I'm going to look on Glassdoor. What's it going to say? I wonder what it's going to say. And this talk around what really gets me going is this talk around, you're going to kill this, you're going to grow this from the ground up, and you're going to do all this stuff. It's like, well, what are all you going to do? You're a company, like you're hiring me to be your marketer, but I don't do everything. I contribute. But yeah, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. My issue with the the employer to candidate relationship at times is the expectation is that marketers control revenue. That's the expectation, we control it, as opposed to influencing it and being part of a team and a process that leads to someone buying from you. But that's the thing, sometimes we're lumped with this, we're the saving grace, like we're going to save the day, you know what I mean?
Riding it on a horse and it's like, I've got the magic thing. A red flag for me is if people are asking for the trick. What's the trick to TikTok? You're like, it just totally devalues I'm going to say art, but the whole discipline of marketing, that the idea that there's a trick that you need to do. I've spoken to you before about, I think sometimes laying traps of expectation can be a smart thing to do here, which is to say, if you see someone's eyes light up because you're pitching the idea that you've got some tricks that are going to work, then that's a red flag. And you want to go, actually, they're looking for a trick. They're looking for the secret sauce. And it's like, it's not a secret sauce. It's a process. It's a discovery. It's a learning exercise. So in my example, I want to work with startups. I want to work with founders that are scaling and growing. What I need to deliver from a marketing point of view is very different. So I am lucky/unlucky enough to have worked with some of the big brands around the world. And if I get the feeling that a client is totally just, I guess, almost ignorant to what they really need, right, in terms of growth, like some fundamentals, I'll start pitching them the stuff that I've done historically for, it could be Hewlett Packard, it could be Microsoft. I could talk about launching an Xbox or whatever it happens to be. If they are completely locked into that, like, yes, that's what we want. I'm blinded by the brand and that experience. And you just go, we are not the agency for you. And actually, you don't know what you want. Because what works for Microsoft, what works for Coca-Cola, I said on a previous episode, they know their marketing. Those guys are amazing. They didn't come to an agency to help work out how to sell sugary brown bubbly liquid, right? They're actually really good at that already. They needed tactical execution, and they were very specific. We need to understand, and they were clear on their brief. And yet, if I was to go to a smaller business that's still struggling to work out, they're kind of walking around like, who am I? Like Zoolander. It's like, who am I? What you need is so much more fundamental. You need work on your positioning. You understand your audience, the pull, the pitch, the promise you're going to make. All these things are still fundamentally in what you need to achieve. And yet people are blinded by these big brands. I had it recently. We found someone to do all the SEO. They did SEO at Canva. I'm looking at it going, yeah, they did 18 months at Canva doing SEO. They're one of probably a team of 12 globally, I'm guessing. But Canva's got unbelievable depth of content. They have maybe 100 plus producers of templates. They have content writers, and they have kick-ass domain authority. It ain't hard to write a page and rank. And you're coming to me, and you're an accounting firm with 3 backlinks and a year's worth of domain authority and age, and you're like, yeah, we employed this SEO person because they increased Canva. They gave them $1 million worth of revenue. And you're like, it ain't going to work the same way. I think that expectation, but also understanding who you are as a client and who you are as a business is just so misplaced. And taking marketing strategies from big business and trying to apply it to small business, fraught with danger. Trying to dump one person with the expectations that you just outlined, it's not just unrealistic, it's just damn unethical. I have worked with clients, and you speak with an owner and you find this one person, this one marketing grad, and this one awesome lady I worked with, and I just had to remember, I won't say the company or her name. I realized I ended up mentoring this one person, and you're just talking to them and you're just going, oh my God, you've been saddled with everything. They've put everything on you, and I need to protect you and help you. And, when they eventually left the business, I was such an advocate for them. I became their reference, like the agency. And I remember the person rang me up and they said, it's not usual that the reference for someone is the agency that they worked. And I explained what had happened and how much I liked the person and what they'd been able to do and the duress of their job. Because if they had have said that, it would have sounded bad. And they got that job. And I was super happy for that person to be able to move on. But I think expectations of what one person's going to be able to deliver without providing the mentorship and the guidance to learn that, I just think it's just, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a non-swear word to describe it, but let's just summarize it that I don't like it.
Emotionally immature, I would say.
Yeah.
That's my take on this. It's just, it does feel to me at times like it is a way to pass responsibility on for what your responsibility is as the owner or the senior person within a company. Let's just get this person, they can take on all the blame. It's all their fault when revenue's not where we want it to be. One person in our company, it's all their fault. It's a sort of an easy, that's easy to do, I guess. Like you just just blame them.
Yeah.
No, there's no one's worried about what I'm doing and how little value I'm bringing, but I can bring someone on to be blamed.
When I was learning the agency ropes, there was a guy who was a great mentor to me, only a few years younger, but he just knew how agency world worked. And he sat in this room and he delivered this immortal line where he just went, look, at the end of the day, you're hiring us. If this strategy doesn't work, you get to fire us. You get to hire the next agency. And then if you're really not good at your job, you've got a window to go find another job before anyone else discovers that you're the problem. And it was the most brutal Antipodean line to deliver in a London agency pitch. But it just cut through and you could see them and they kind of laughed, but you could see them all just looking, I say all, the people who were in the client side. And it was a pitch process, just sort of nod and go, yeah, you're not wrong. Like you're basically here to give us a shelter for our job if stuff doesn't work. It's the same internally. I do worry about the number of people who get very good at trying to, as soon as they're hired, hire a pyramid of power. And they want to hire people that they can jettison and blame. You know these people, like we know we've worked with them. They're so quick to blame somebody else because they fundamentally know that they're not good at their job. They don't know what they're doing and they just rack up the bill. So you get someone, you hire in, we've spoken about this on a phone call a few months back, but hiring the one marketing person and stuff. So, okay, we've spoken about hiring a junior marketer with not much experience and expecting like a huge amount of information. On the flip side, you go and hire someone who actually does have 10 years, 15 years experience, and you're paying them, we'll make a number, like $140,000, $150,000 a year. That person doesn't want to do on-site SEO anymore. They don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of media buying and running paid search ads. They don't want to do all these detailed work. So you've hired someone with enough experience to tick all the boxes, but they don't want to do the work. So then they're going to go and either hire junior staff members or agencies or both. So you're a little bit stuck because if you're going to start from zero, do you hire someone with no experience and you set them these tasks they can't deliver? Or do you hire the one person paying 3 times the salary, but they don't want to do the work? And I see it as well, where you get this marketing person who comes in and you go, oh, we're paying $150,000 a year. We expect them to then do everything because we're paying a huge amount. I mean, it's a big salary, right? But then they need to hire 2 staff members and an agency to deliver for you. And what you've actually done is signed yourself up to $500,000 a year worth of costs.
Yes.
And I just think a lack of understanding of the multifaceted skills required to really be an all-round marketer and what that looks like and the need to hire teams is why we have agencies. It's why we have freelancers and contractors to provide that buffer and that service behind it. And yet we have this weird desire from sort of power-hungry pyramid building people who want to hire all their staff internally. They want to have, the hierarchy, they have their own team and they want to run that. And it's so expensive. Weirdly, if the company's big enough, once you hire that team, it kind of gets baked into the costs. And I'll sit there and haggle around, paying a web hosting company in design like $500 a month to look after web hosting. And you look and you go, you've got a whole team of people sitting around. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I think the system of recruitment and hiring expectations is broken. I do think there needs to be a really nice symbiotic relationship between freelancers, consultants, and agencies. There is a purpose and there's a reason why they will continue to exist. And they need to be able to fill the gaps around because not everyone can turn up and hire a $500,000 to $1 million marketing department off the start. But I think it's about understanding who you want to hire and what you want to achieve and the level you bring them in on. So, we discussed a junior person and setting high expectations is unfair to that junior person massively. That's probably the biggest problem. Hiring a mid-tier person you end up with this problem where they don't have strategic vision, they have management, but then they're not willing to do execution. Or they shouldn't have to do because they did that 10 years ago. So now you end up with, they can't strategically guide and direct the company at a C-suite level, and nor should they be expected to. But they also don't want to be doing the diligent like outreach SEO building because you're paying them over $100,000 a year. The third one is you end up hiring, if your first marketing hire is sort of CMO level, they can set the full direction, but then they have to hire the entire pyramid underneath them to make that happen. And so I think it's really important that you work out what you want to achieve and you get the appropriate stack to reduce that turnover. And that might mean you go out there and go, I'm going to hire my mid-tier manager because I need someone who can manage and deliver. But I'm going to hire Jack to do my positioning consultancy, to work out where we're going to go, to work with it for 3 months. And he's going to drop that paper that we all sign off on to the marketing manager, who's then going to go and hire maybe one offsider to do some lifting and 2 or 3 contractors or an agency to do delivery. And if you go in with that expectation, then your marketing manager is delivering the vision of a very expensive $250,000 consultant, or annualized consultant. They're delivering that vision. That's not going to change in 1 or 2 years. And then you can use an agency with multifaceted staff to deliver SEO, paid search, social media, content, outreach, link building, TV, radio, whatever it is. And then your internal team is about execution, management, efficiency, delivery, reporting, and those kind of things. But I think it's really important to understand who you are and where you're at and setting your expectations at an appropriate level. And I think, you should always have a mixed bag.
Yes.
And getting the right people. And I'd like for the industry to be a bit stronger at holding people to task who over-expect from a junior, and then at the same time who hire seniors without any understanding that they're about to go and drop $1 million on an entire marketing department to make it happen. They're both bad. I have more of an issue with the juniors who are given high responsibility. But geez, I've got my fair share of companies that have sort of hired at a really high level and just have not budgeted for the infrastructure to support that person at the same time.
Part of my service that has actually evolved over time is like this marketing team structure part of it. It's hard to sell. It doesn't sound that sexy. It's not that interesting, but it is critical that you get that internal versus external structure right. Like who should they be? What should the cost be? What are the responsibilities? Because you need to be able to think about how it's all going to work together and what is the total cost going to be. As you're saying that, I'm like, oh, you're speaking my language, because I don't think we've spoken about this, is that, I have a service, or part of my service is structuring marketing teams appropriately. And that's not just the internal team, that's with the agency or with the freelancers as well. Huge, I think. I think it's needed. It's hard to sell, but it is probably one of the most important things I do, I think, because a recruiter who hasn't worked in marketing either can't really do that.
Yeah.
They don't know what's needed. They don't know how that should be structured. They can recruit for a position that's been decided upon, but as far as structuring the team, I don't think, unless they've had a background in marketing, I don't think they're going to be the person to do that.
Recruiters that don't use the internal team to vet the technical quality of the candidates as well. Like, I get it. Recruitment is a power play, right? If you're involved with that. But the most dialed in companies, I think, are willing to accept that maybe peers should be involved in the testing. I actually, in my experience, it's the peers that are the most brutal because they're looking at it going, are you better than me? What do you know? So that doesn't mean they should be negotiating their salary, but why not send their peers in to talk to them technically and go, does this person really know what they're talking about? I have a background in SEO, but that background doesn't mean I can't talk SEO to the level that I would need to. So I need to go to an SEO expert to say, you should do that. That's fine for me internally as an agency. I actually think that if you're looking to hire particular staff in, so let's just say you're working with me, we've built up part of your marketing to a level now where it actually requires, it's fundamental, say content and video production is now so big in your business, you need to hire someone internally to run all of your content. Great. You should use your agency to vet that person's talent, to work out who that person is rather than doing it yourself. I think the idea of people hiring outside their field of expertise is scary. And look, this would happen in any kind of discipline, right? But for some reason in marketing, people feel like, I think you've spoken about this a number of times on your podcast, right? But people feel like they know marketing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yes.
Oh, I get marketing. I
Yeah.
can find the right person.
Yeah.
Help me.
Okay. Yeah. You're a 23-year-old recruiter. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's a really interesting problem that, you do have business owners who really don't know what they're looking to do and where they go. And there are definitely recruiters who specialize in these areas and can add lots of value. And, there's recruiters that, in-house themselves, and there's right ways to do this. But I guess I come from it less about the business and more about the people. And it just hurts me, linking this back to the turnover. I think all of this leads to, why is there turnover? Well, because someone came in with limited experience and got asked to do too much. Or someone came in with a heap of experience and got told to do the shit-kicking jobs because they just had to do it because there's no more budget. Or someone came in to do a job in marketing and there is actually no marketing budget left. Like, oh, we spent it on you. What? Like, I need something to do something with. And I just think that leads to a lot of the turnover.
I've had that happen before, that last situation where... Yeah, I was I was told that they were going to do a raise, the company that I started working for, and I was going to be CMO, but come in now and 3 months before the raise, that's fine. Get some fundamentals in place, get us moving, fine. But in quite a large capital raise. 6 months later, no raise in sight, and this is years ago. I think they still haven't done a raise, but that completely changed my context. Right, I come in with thinking, okay, I'll be at the CMO level, and I will. I had an idea of where I'd spend some of that money. If I don't have the money, now all of a sudden it's just me. And you're doing everything. You're trying to understand, and obviously at this stage of the business doesn't really know their customers that well. They don't have product market fit. You're at this stage where you're trying to piece all these things together, and then execute everything as well. And there's no money to spend, like I'm a terrible designer, for example. Like, you don't want me designing anything, I promise you. And I wasn't in that situation, I think. I think there was a tiny bit of money for a graphic designer on the side. That one decision of not raising completely changed the context for me, which is what I was promised coming in as well. So, and that was beyond my control.
And then you just sit there and go, I'm a very expensive person to be doing this simple task that actually I'm not that skilled to do anyway. In terms of, to turn it around, I think when you're hiring people, the person willing to talk about what they're not great at is sometimes as important. I'm the same as you. Like, I will have clients, the line that I'll often deliver to people is, look, I am a middle-aged, white, heterosexual male. I am almost the epitome of privilege in society. Everyone listens to anything that I say. I think that's like a Homer Simpson, quote.
Apart from the marketer part.
Apart from the marketer, it's a bit different. Which means I'm used to people hearing what I have to say, which means I'm comfortable voicing my opinion. So if you ask me something, I'll tell you my opinion. And I've got to be so careful to qualify things and go, look, I can answer. I'll give you my answer. But my knowledge level's down here. And I'll probably deliver with confidence up here, right? So it's that Dunning-Kruger effect again. I've presented to like accelerator cohorts where I'll say, look, my design skill is terrible. My fashion sense is terrible. I'm wearing a short sleeve, colourful shirt. Like, I don't get fashion. And I'll say that in my opening. I'll go, look, I've worked for H&M. I've worked for Burberry, right? My fashion sense is terrible, so I must be a good marketer. And yet people will still ask me design input. Oh, what do you think about this logo? Should we be doing more like this? It's like, yeah, I can answer it, but you probably shouldn't. Hiring the right people for the right roles and getting specialists is really important. And getting your marketing stack, as you sort of like in your team, right, is critical. Are you going to end up with a white middle-aged guy wearing a short sleeve shirt who's in charge of design and brand and look and feel? And you don't want that, right? You want me doing a different part of your business. If you haven't thought about it and you haven't appreciated all the nuances and the variations in what marketing is, because it's people's perception of what is marketing is just so wrong. It's like fingers and thumbs. It's like advertising and marketing. And people just think, oh, well, advertising's marketing. It's like, no, advertising's like thumbs. And you try to explain to people, they still don't get it. And you just go, there's so much to get and there's so many different parts. You've got to work out what's important, what's critical, what you need to in-house, what should be not outhouse, but outsourced. And I think if you're not getting it right, you're going to struggle. And then, the expectations around that need to be critical. And that pressure just so often filters down through the hierarchy and it finds itself down the bottom and people get burnt out. They get disenfranchised or they just get scapegoated. I don't know what's more prevalent. Probably the scapegoating, to be honest. That people just like, let's just drop those people. But getting back to my point around making redundancies in staff and client turnover, how you internally rationalize that redundancy. If you've ever been faced with it, where you've got a staff of 50, 60, 70 people, and the CFO gets in with his ruler and says, right, we need to cut X amount of costs, and you are literally adding up salaries. How you decide to rank those is really interesting when push comes to shove, because you don't, you might look at some things like salary, you might look at years of experience, billability, but it really does help. It does help you rationalize in your mind where you're at, what's happening, who's right. And I think agency life hardens you and wears you out. It's not for the faint of heart if you keep going. I think the people who have done proper agency work for 10, 15 years, man, you've got to be tough. But it does force you to constantly rationalize who you're hiring, who you're giving pay rises to, what your succession planning is, and where you're going. And I think sometimes for a lot of companies, you're not under that imminent pressure of having to make redundancies all the time, or the pressure and profitability. There's a lot of just business as usual. But if you were thinking about, who do I really want to support? Who could I not live without? And it's so often retrospective. We stop and we just go, oh my God, that person was amazing. And I think we all know those people that when they leave, you just go, I had no idea they did all that. They were amazing. And yet they're often the quiet achievers who do the stuff, and you just go, why did the squeaky wheel's over here? I would have done better to not incentivize and placate that person and focus on this person over here. So it's one of the things from big, brutal agency life that I've always maintained is I do sometimes stop, look at the payroll, look at who's on there, experience, and run through the exercise of, if someone was to leak this internally, right? Which I don't hold it as a big secret, but what would happen if you exposed the payroll? What would your staff say to you? If you sat there and went, well, what are you paying yourself? Like, how comfortable would you be? It's a really confronting exercise. I think I'd be okay. This feels a bit like, how would you feel if you accidentally were caught on the front step of your house, locked out, and you were naked or in a towel? Kind of like, how do you feel about your body? How would you feel about if your pay slip was there? Would your staff feel that was adequate, more or less? What about the other staff, internal staff? What if these two people found out what they were being paid? I think if you, right now, pause the podcast, stop the YouTube video, and think about your staff members, if you find yourself in a situation where you wouldn't want two staff members knowing about their pay, you need to really think about what you're going to do over the next few months to make that more reasonable and equitable. Because I do think there's a quiet person in your team that's sitting there, not your team, Jack, but speaking of the figure in our team, that might deserve more, that would feel aggrieved if they knew what someone else was getting paid. And that goes from the lowest person all the way to the top. I think at the moment, I would be comfortable. I think at the moment I could look at it and all the staff would look at each other and it would be okay. I was sort of forced to think about this. So a bunch of my in-laws are actors and they're in the theatre, dramatic world. They speak about income at an uncomfortable level. They talk about what they earn in a really open way. Like, you're kind of like, I made this much and this is what I'm getting for an ad. And I'm like, oh my God, don't talk about that. And maybe it comes from the fact that maybe there's something about this nakedness and they're always, getting changed quickly in between scenes or something. I don't know what it is, right? It was explained to me that they have to do that because how else do they know what they should be getting paid? Because they can't compare it to somebody else. And I don't think I've got the management guts to have an open payroll. I've heard about companies who do this, right? I've heard about companies that just have a really open. And I know that government jobs will have pay scales, so people kind of know what you're on. And I'm really warming to that idea. When my wife explained to me how the pay scales work in government, and you're like, oh, if you know someone's they've got names, they've got little codes, AO8 or whatever they're called, then you know they're in a pay scale. Originally, I was like, that feels offensive, but actually it's quite a healthy position to be in. I think that part of the turnover is that people aren't aware or they have false ideas of what people are earning or, higher or lower. And I do wonder, I know I said at the start, I've got no answers for this, but in talking it through, I do wonder, even if you can't get to transparency, I don't think I can get to transparency, but can you rationally look at it and say to yourself, I think this is fair. I think this is equitable. I'm happy with where these people are at. And I wonder, tying this right back to what we spoke about with client rates, agency rates, and what you charge. Maybe a different way of thinking about it is to be a little bit transparent. I mean, again, it's like, well, this is what people are paid. Now, I would imagine a lot of clients go, oh, so Gerard must be taking all the money for himself. I think most people would be pretty shocked. I think they get an idea in their head that people are making more money than they are. Conversely, I think there's probably some people making some pretty good money. Having worked at a high enough level in group agencies, I got to see enough senior pay packets, and there are scary numbers. It's really scary. Like, there are people, I think when you get to a stage where executives are making 10x the juniors, I think it gets really hard to justify some of that. We're talking here, someone getting paid 50 grand and someone getting paid 500,000. I think it's hard. It's really hard to justify that. And so they're going to want to be very secretive about it. I think there are business owners where staff would be okay and happy with people making that kind of money if they felt everything else was working right. But yeah, I think it's an interesting exercise. It's interesting enough that I'm pausing as I talk because I'm rationalizing where we're at. But I think it's really important. And I think if you want to resist and fight staff turnover in marketing, I think you want to be able to defend those people and be consistent with your pay and your reviews. And maybe it's about setting expectations. Instead of like having someone have to fight for every pay rise, just go, we're working on the basis you're going to get 5% every 6 months or something really simple. And then you peg them. Like they might not get it or they might get more. But I think you've got to be pretty consistent. And I think particularly at a junior level, when I say junior, I just mean only a couple of years of experience. I don't mean junior in any other way. I think reviewing salary annually is just doing a disservice as well. Like, they've come from no experience to a year. You need to be doing these every 6 months. Okay, when someone's over 100,000, you can probably get to annual reviews and things like that. I think it's absolutely critical that you can defend those people. And if you think of it like redundancies, like if I was ranking those people and I had to like lose X amount of cost, who's the person down the bottom all the time? Not think about cut that person, think about, well, how do I change it? So why are they there? And then how do I change that person? And I think we live in a world where, unfortunately, in marketing and particularly agencies, where staff are your commodity and you have a duty to them to protect them and grow the business around them. But if you can look at it, rationalize that and go, well, who's underperforming the most relative to where they're at? Then you get an opportunity to fix it. If you run through that hypothetical exercise, I think you got a chance to fix it. And I think if we could take some of those things into what we did, maybe we wouldn't have agencies running with 50% staff turnover every year. It's not efficient.
Yep.
And I don't think it creates good culture. I don't think it creates a sense of security. Generationally, there's this joke that I've got to sit in between that. I've heard people say, like, the confidence to sign up for tickets using my work email address. People were buying tickets to the World Cup, the Women's World Cup that came to Australia. And you were buying tickets a year in advance, right? Confidence in job security is entering to the FIFA website your work email address. Millennials below did not buy FIFA tickets with their work email address because they're genuinely like, I'm probably not going to be in the job in a year. That's an amazing moment, right? So if you're not putting your work email address in, you're thinking, right? You're thinking about moving. Whereas people who are, say, older than 50, they've got their work email address in with the ATO, they've got it on job sites, they're using their work email on their Facebook account. And you're like, what? It's just a different psyche of job security. And I don't think we live in a world now, a modern Australian marketing digital world, where anyone's doing that. Their work email address is for work. They're really not entering other places. And look, I know that because I'd like to think Fractal's different, but it's not that different. When we have staff members leave and all the emails, bounce back, you don't get that many external emails. Add another 20 years of age onto these staff members. Yeah, they're using their work email for correspondence, chatting to friends, signing up and buying FIFA tickets.
It's a great proxy.
Yeah.
It's a very good proxy.
Didn't really,
I never thought about that before. Yeah.
That's probably why I own my own domain name.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
Yeah, I just route everything through that. I don't even trust that Gmail's going to be around in 10 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. All right, well, we've covered a lot here. I don't think I have any really thoughts to sum up. I mean, the 50% number's wild. That's just wild per year. I haven't worked in agency, but that sounds awful to me. I'm imagining an awful, insecure feeling all the time.
Look, it means you're getting a cake wishing someone best of luck every week. Every Friday there's people leaving.
Yeah.
You coming to leaving drinks? It's the same as Friday drinks.
we were merging into one to save costs. Thanks again for coming along. I think we've covered heaps in that episode. Both quite passionate about this topic. I hope we see some change in the near future. Any other final thoughts and where people can find you?
Oh, look, If people just Google for Fractal or Google Gerard Doyle, what I will say is I will talk to anyone about their business at any time. So my standard reply is, here's my Calendly link. Let's grab half an hour. I love nothing more than talking about people's businesses. If you've got marketing questions, it's probably the thing that costs me more money than anything else, is that my half-hour chats become 2-hour chats. I friggin' love it. I will do it. I'll dissect and give input to anyone's business. So take advantage of my vulnerabilities, because I'll go for ages. And you probably learned that by listening to me now. So.
Oh, well, that sounds like a great offer. So yeah, make sure you hit up Gerard and take that up. Thanks so much for being part of another episode of the podcast.
Of course. Thank you.